And now, Legal Perspective with Nick Klekus.
Freedom of speech is one of the most cherished rights in America, but it's also one of the most misunderstood. What exactly does the First Amendment protect? And where is the line between free expression and government overreach? Today, we're breaking it down with Allie Menegakis, attorney at Klekus Law Firm. Allie, great to have you back, as always. So happy that you're here. Let's dive right in. What exactly does the First Amendment protect and guarantee?
The First Amendment protects 5 main rights. First is freedom of speech, freedom to peacefully assemble, freedom of religion, freedom to petition the government, and the last P, do you know what it is, Taylor?
I don't think so.
Freedom of the press.
Okay, freedom of press.
Yes,
so
of course.
I should know that. I'm a little embarrassed. Okay, I feel like something that is kind of a misconception. Does this just apply to U.S. citizens?
It doesn't. Actually, freedom of all the First Amendment rights apply to any person that's on U.S. soil. So that includes residents, non-residents, and that's afforded to them through the Due Process Clause of the Fifth Amendment.
Okay. And now, of course, free speech is not unlimited, right? There's lots of debate going on right now around dangerous speech. So can you explain to us, when is it okay for the government to step in, and when is that considered overreach?
Yeah, absolutely. So first, it's important to know that regarding our free speech, the reason we have the First Amendment is to protect our views, expression, whether it's verbal or written or actions, from government censorship or punishment. So the courts have been very hesitant to censor our speech. But there are 2 main ways that we shouldn't cross the line. And one of them is through any kind of clear and present danger kind of speech. So any imminent threats or inciting violence, for example.
Okay.
And then the second is defamatory language, which generally is making a false statement that could affect someone's reputation.
And I want to ask you about examples when free speech was threatened in the past, but I think more timely, I want to talk about the Mahmoud Khalil case. He was a Columbia University student with a green card, and I've been hearing in the news that he was arrested because of his speech. Is that what happened, Allie?
Actually, it's not. It's really interesting with the Khalil case because he was not actually charged with any kind of crime whatsoever. And he wasn't arrested for crossing that line like we talked about, whether defamatory language or inciting violence. But rather, they used this very old and rare act called the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1952. And that act was actually passed during the McCarthyism era, the Red Scare, when the government was cracking down on communists or people that they thought had communist leanings. And what that act does is really interesting because it affords the Secretary of State the sole authority to use his or her discretion to decide and unilaterally decide whether someone's presence could cause, and I'm going to quote this, quote, potentially serious adverse foreign policy consequences. Now that's kind of vague and also very subjective, which is concerning, and it was abused in the 1950s to deport people, deny passports, deny visas for anyone that they unilaterally believed was associated with a type of view that they didn't agree with.
Okay, that sounds a little scary, Allie. I'm not going to lie to you. So, you know, from a legal perspective, what do you think is kind of at stake right now, and what should we be aware of as Americans to protect our First Amendment and to make sure that no one else's First Amendment rights are violated?
Well, our country has become very polarized. I don't think anyone will argue with that. And you might find yourself on the opposite side of an issue from your neighbor or your friend or your family, and that's okay. That's what we love about our country, and our Constitution protects differing views. But protecting free speech means standing up, you know, not only for the views that we agree with, but the ones that we don't. And if we start villainizing and criminalizing certain types of speech, we only end up hurting ourselves and our own rights, and it's a slippery slope. I would want to close on this quote that I always think about when it comes to free speech. You know, it's often associated with Voltaire, but actually was written by Evelyn Hall, that says, "I disapprove of what you say, but I will protect to the death your right to say it."
That was very well said, Allie, and I think that that is something that many of us don't think about, but we should take with us day after day. Thank you so much for being here. We're so excited to have you back next week. We're going to talk about protester rights.
Yes.
I'm really excited for that conversation. As always, it's a pleasure. See you next
Always.
Tuesday. We're back after this.
This has been Legal Perspective with Nick Kleekus.